Those that watch these trapping videos regularly will know exactly where I am from this shot alone. Of course, I'm on the outskirts of Lound Wood here at Eakring. July the 31st today, so hopefully by the end of this trapping session in this video we'll be in August. Of all months, where has this year gone, I'll never know, but we've had a run of warm nights, very warm nights the last few days, and this is going to be the last of them apparently. It all breaks down from now on, and thunderstorms are predicted for tomorrow morning. Hopefully no storms tonight, but I predict that we'll get a lot of moths. People are reporting good numbers of footmen, and yet I'm hardly recording any at all. So we'll see what happens as we go through the next couple of hours, firing up with the light. Once I've decided where I'm going to trap, will be at 2200 hours probably. But it's a lovely still evening with just the slightest breeze, so you could say ideal conditions. Well, we're up and running, and I think I can hear rumbles of thunder a long way to the south. But any thunderstorm or rain is an hour or two away from me, although it is predicted to be dry, at least while the time I'm here. Anyway, we shall see what comes in. Well, the light is now warmed up. The first moths are coming in. We've seen a brimstone, but it seems very quiet at the moment. Not many insects at all, but I'm sure that will change in the course of the next few hours, and hopefully I'll be here for at least 3 hours. I want to try and make the most of the conditions tonight. Hopefully it stays dry, we don't have some unpredicted or unforecasted shower that ends proceedings. So we'll see what comes in the next few hours. I'm sure it's going to be a decent night. But while it's quiet and there's nothing boisterous bouncing around on the sheet, I thought, have a look at this beautiful brimstone. It looks very fresh to me, this individual. I have fond memories from younger days. This was one of the first moths that wasn't a hawk moth that I got interested in, and I used to go out onto the street on a night time and search along the hawthorn hedgerows and look for female brimstones that were flying around, and this was probably one of the first moths that I reared from young larvae and eggs. But a beautiful moth too. What more could you ask for in a UK moth? Despite being extremely common and found in all habitat types, this is guaranteed even in the smallest of urban gardens. It's an absolute beauty. Who doesn't love a brimstone? Well, it's a quiet start, although a hornet has come in to disrupt proceedings, although it's very mild-mannered and well-behaved at the moment. It seems very early for hornet, although we are more or less in August, but I usually associate moth trapping and hornets a little bit later than this. But I'll do what I always do with hornets, and that's pot it up, keep it safely to my side, and then once I'm ready to release it and I'm about to go out the pot, it comes. I never kill them. They're not a problem at all. They can, more of a nuisance really than anything. but you can end up with lots of pots, so I try and use one pot and get 5 or 6 in that. That can be tricky at sometimes, but it provides myself with entertainment. But in terms of moths that have come in, gold spot is a nice one. That's a beautiful moth, gold spot. It's a moth of late summer and early autumn. Maybe we'll get a second brood in, but an absolute beauty, and I don't think it's still here. If it does turn up again, I'll try and film it, but in the meantime photograph it is. But ruby tiger is another one that's in, and in terms of micros, very little Spilanota oscillana, and that's a nice little tortrix, and a Snaphasia, which is probably going to be Snaphasia stephensiana. They usually are, but that's all so far on the micro front. So a nice pleasant start and nice conditions too. That breeze, well, that very light breeze, is just stopping it from getting too clammy and horrible. And I might as well be out here because it's too hot to sleep at home anyway in these conditions. So a nice quiet start, and I'm leaving my tea to get cold. That will never do. I wish it was something stronger. Right, time to pop that hornet up. There's a nice ruby tiger. Second brood of ruby tigers this is, and this one's just starting to warm up a little bit. But a very, very nice moth indeed, and that abdomen is a beautiful, brilliant red. Quite an attractive species, and the hind wings are also red, whereas the forewings are that sort of brownish, reddish colour. The only discernible markings are the two sort of discal spots on the forewings, but a very nice thing indeed, and a nice bit of colour to add to the proceedings. And a common moth, you'll get this at home quite easily. Well, I've got this magpie moth that's come in. Always nice to get one of these, and may well be the first or second time they've trapped magpie moth here at Eakring in recent years. Long time since this has been at the light, but again, very much a moth that reminds me of my childhood. We used to have these breeding in the garden. You could always find the caterpillars on a gooseberry that was growing in the hedgerow between our house and the next door neighbours. Every year you used to find them. They don't occur there now, or at least we're not aware of them occurring. I've looked for the larvae. I may well run the trap at my parents and see what turns up. Box moth would be one because they're everywhere. But it's nice to see this beautiful magpie, and I think there may well be a second one at the far end of the sheet. Cracking moth, it really is. As you can see, there's a nice range of activity. Moths are starting to come in now. No big numbers, but easy enough to monitor what's new and what's already been in, and it's just moving around a little bit. But we're approaching 32 species and going along very nicely. Conditions are ideal. We've still got a temperature of 18 centigrade looking at that, and it's just right. It's a lovely comfortable temperature this evening. Very nice indeed. And here's that gold spot that I mentioned earlier on. It's took an age to settle down, but I think these are always well worth the wait to have a look at. An absolute cracking moth, one of those moths that can inspire people to get into moth trapping and moth recording. Beautiful moth with those two gold spots on a golden brown background, and then you've got a series of metallic gold dashes near the corner of the wing there. It's a beautiful thing. Always looks very much a rarity when it first comes into the light, but it's common enough, and most people will trap this in an urban or suburban garden. It's a real beauty. One that I do like to trap, and very much a moth of the latter part of summer and early autumn. It's an absolute cracker, and a close relative of the migrant species silver white too. So that's gold spot, a nice one to have in this evening. Well, it continues to get busy around the sheet. First of the lesser broad-bordered yellow underwings. It's a beautiful moth, but I don't like it coming in because it's a lot to write. That's the only reason I don't like it. It really is an absolute beauty. But a nice range of species coming in. Very pleasant conditions. What's not to like? Now I'll be quick with this because there's more moths now, so more chance of something getting bashed about but while it's settled. But this is a beautiful noctuid, and it's a dusky sallow, often seen on flowers during the daytime, but a quite beautiful noctuid. There's nothing else like this one at all, to be honest, and it is common as well. I get this at home fairly regularly, and if you're trapping anywhere in more rural locations, this one is going to turn up. But it's an absolute beauty, a real cracker of a moth, and common as well. So another moth where you could say what's not to like about it. Beautiful. Hopefully there will be a difference to the background noise, and that's, I've tried to reduce the noise from the generator. Can't be helped because there's a very sensitive microphone on these phone cameras, so I've extended the cable. The generator is now 10 meters further away, and hopefully it makes a difference. But lots of moths coming in. Moths that I need to write down. It's surprising how quickly you notice a moth. I must write that down, then another one comes in. I need to write that one down as well. And before you know where you are, you've forgotten 2 or 3 over the course of the night, and then you remember the following morning when you're writing the trap list up. Black archers has just come in. But no water beetles tonight. I thought there would be a lot of water beetles, but there hasn't been one. A few water boatmen, yes. And main thing, a nice number of moths. And it's coming up to a cup of tea time. The moths are really coming in now. It's a great session. Well, it's nice to see good numbers of moths coming in. Lots on the sheet. Very nice, very welcome too, after the year that most moth trappers have had, a year of poor numbers of course. But a nice variety. We're on 60 something species now. New species coming in all the time, and ideal conditions. It's always nice when I hold a pot up like this, and this one has a moth in it, as you may well be able to see. And this is a moth that I've never trapped before, and it's certainly new to the Eakring area, and it's relatively new to Nottinghamshire too, and it's a tree lichen beauty. It's a species that I'm expecting to occur at home. It's a beautiful little thing, and it's green, and you all know how much I like a green moth. But so pleased, this is a species that I've been after, and I've been after it for a couple of years since it first started to turn up in Nottinghamshire, and here it is. Wonderful. Another new moth for the Eakring area. I thought the next new moth might be box moth, but not to be. But I'm quite happy with tree lichen beauty, and it really is a beauty. A small one, but a beauty nonetheless. Brilliant. And here's a view of the very busy sheet. We're around about 70 species. I'm ready for another walk round. When it's like this, you have to walk around pretty much continuously. I have a couple of species to one side that I need to check on, and some that I haven't written down yet in the notebook. It's just the ideal. I nearly didn't come out this evening, but I'm glad I did. Well, we're well over 70 species now, and we have another moth that's new to the Eakring area, and it's a ringed China mark. It is in here, but I am going to release it because I do have good photos of ringed China mark after taking several last year at Miss and Carr. But it isn't a common moth in Nottinghamshire. Its distribution is rather scattered and confined, as are most China marks, to wetland areas, but they are prone to wandering. But maybe this one has come from a quarter of a mile down the way there from Eakring Flash. But always nice to get a new addition to your local patch or your garden. So that's ringed China mark. I will put a photo in, or have put a photo in. It's a fairly attractive brownish moth, but a nice rarity value here. Wonderful. Well, I've just had a little wander, just a few yards, just to stretch the old legs, get the old muscles going. Hardly had time to move from the sheet because I've been kept busy. It's not hectic with moths coming in. I'm not overwhelmed. I haven't been at all over the course of about 3 hours. I don't know what time it is, to be honest, and quite frankly I don't really care. It's just so enjoyable. Always nice to get new species. I'm really happy with Tree Lichen Beauty and ringed China mark. 2 more to the slowly increasing Eakring list. The number of species that have moved in between the time when Dilys and I stopped trapping here about 10 years ago, I think it was, and concentrated more on Sherwood Forest. And between that time and me returning here again a couple of years ago, it's clear that a number of species have turned up and are breeding here, and coronet is one. That's just reminded me that I haven't written coronet down, and one has not long since come in. But a very pleasant scene and a very pleasant evening. Bit of clearing sky overhead, and thankfully no sight nor sound of any thunderstorms. Well, it's quite the peaceful scene. Plenty of moths coming and, importantly, going. I've been quite concerned. I'm seeing a lot of moths that are incredibly worn, and I think that's down to moths being confined in a Robinson trap with lots of egg boxes. If you get a few hawk moths in there, they can become severely battered. This is my preferred method. It means that, yeah, you have to stay with the light, of course, but that's what I like to do, because I like to see this. I like to see moths coming in, of which there are a decent number. First dusky thorns of the year. Straw underwing is another one. That's not a moth that I catch a great deal of. Over the years, we've never caught more than half a dozen, I would imagine. It may have been just about annual here, but a very attractive moth. nicely marked but dark forewings, and then the hind wings are beautifully plain and straw coloured, very contrasting. Lime speck pug is another one that's in, and nutmeg as well. First nutmegs that I've had this year. That's usually a common moth at home, although admittedly I didn't trap during the first part of the year at home. But where I did trap, I would normally expect to get nutmeg, but it seems to be one species that's perhaps not done so well this year. But it's nice to see an active sheet, even if it does look in a bit of a state, and my clobber is generally rather untidy and everywhere. But that's always a good sign. It's a sign that it's a good night for moths, which this definitely is. Anyway, now it's time for a cup of tea and a few biscuits. Just had one of those hectic periods. A hectic period which has just brought 2 new species to the Eakring area. One is a spinach, which I'm hoping is still knocking around somewhere. I did have it potted up, and then I thought I'll let it go because I've got a few photos of it at home. And then I thought, well, you could film it, couldn't you? That's what you're meant to be doing. But in the event of me not relocating it, then you'll be looking at some rather nice pictures of what is a very, very nice moth indeed. And it's not a common moth. I've only trapped it once, I think, and that was at home a few years ago. And so I've checked on the distribution map, and there's no 1 kilometre grid square in the Eakring area. Now, the other moth that's come in, 2 of them came in within a couple of minutes, and it's a moth which I think I mentioned, unless I'm completely imagining that I mentioned it, and it's the infamous box moth. Now, the nearest place this moth would have come from is Eakring village, which is half a mile away, and so it shows that this moth does travel distances, and that's why it's been able to spread through the UK at the rate that it has. But this is certainly the most hated moth in the country at the moment. It's no fault of the moths, and it's purely the fault of gardeners and their desire to have box balls and box hedges scattered all around their gardens and in the front of their houses. That's provided the ideal breeding habitat for the caterpillars of this species. And my brother and father at home, they have one smallish box tree or box bush in the front garden, and I recorded Nottinghamshire's first record of larvae of this moth there a number of years ago, and the other week I disturbed 4 or 5 of these, and my brother is seeing this beautiful moth. No getting away from it. It's an absolute beauty, but he's seeing them nearly every day now flying around, or they're very easily disturbed, and the other one is still knocking around on the sheet somewhere. So a new species for Eakring, one that I expected. I still expect this at home, and surprisingly I've not had this yet. And here it is in agricultural farmland at the side of deciduous woodland. So they're obviously moving about. But although many people hate it, and there are people, primarily gardeners, who are trying to kill this off by the 100, you're wasting your time. The only way you'll get rid of this moth is if you burn every box bush in the country. And as that's never going to happen, the moth is here to stay. It's always a saying when you get species like this that are really infamous, and yes, the larvae do damage box trees, it's not the fault of the moth. It's purely down to human interference, like it or not. But I must admit, I'm pleased to get this on the Eakring list. I nearly ate that then. I'm just sat by a sheet full of moths, and the box that the light is mounted on is also full of moths, at least full by 2024 standards. And this has been the best night of the year so far. But I was drawn and thinking back to early in the year when I came up here a couple of times in January or February on those rare occasions when the temperature overnight wasn't going to fall below 8 centigrade. You become overjoyed at temperatures like that during the winter months, and after you've packed up trapping at the end of the year, for those really keen moth trappers, you're soon getting the urge to start the trap up again after Christmas and the New Year. And I like trapping in the cooler months of the year. It makes you appreciate these kind of nights. I think sets you up for these kind of nights when the temperature's 3 or 4 times higher than on a winter's night or an early spring night, and the number of moths is infinitely more than on those nights. But I enjoy catching pale brindled beauties and spring ushers, I really do. In between catching pale brindled beauties and spring ushers, I tend to think about these kind of nights, because in winter you wish for these kind of nights. And now I'm already starting to wish for those late autumn, early winter, and late winter and early spring nights. I do enjoy it. I love moth trapping. It's antisocial, yes, but I suppose I am antisocial. But I enjoy the relative peace and quiet that moth trapping brings, and that satisfaction at the end of a trapping session and the rewards of catching something that you've never caught before or is new for the area. That's what I enjoy about this hobby. It's a fabulous hobby. However you do it, whether you sit out with the trap for so many hours or all night, or whether you run a trap overnight in the comfort of your garden, as long as you enjoy it and are providing useful data and records, and that's really what it should be about. If you're going to trap moths, record those that you can and send those records in. It's a great hobby, it really is. And I like being out somewhere like this, relatively in the middle of nowhere. Peace and quiet. It's beautiful, as is this hobby. There's two moths that represent two different periods of my life, to be honest. As I mentioned earlier, you've got the magpie, which is very much a moth of my childhood, less seen now. And then you've got the box moth, a moth which has arrived here and is becoming one of the most common moths trapped in people's gardens. But what a beauty box moth is. Look at that purple sheen to it. Beautiful moth, readily disturbed during the day, but two very attractive moths, even if you don't like or refuse to like box tree moth. Well, here's an absolute beauty, and sort of the staple diet of a moth trapper's year. This of course is a poplar hawk moth, and everyone likes to see a big one, and they don't come much bigger than poplar hawk moths unless you're lucky enough to catch privet hawk moth or one of the rarer migrants. But what a beautiful moth these are. They really are. One of our most attractive hawk moths that we have, and one of two that is in tonight, and both have come in quite late on actually. Nice to see. Well, it's gone 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm quite happy with the time that I've had here. This has been a brilliant session, the best one of the year by a long way. And although it's still highly likely that several more species will come in, I am on about 110 species, and there's a couple to identify that I'll be taking back, a couple of micros. But it's been a fabulous session, really has, better than I expected. I can't wait to trap again, but it's a shame that the temperatures are going back down to about more normal temperatures. We haven't had enough nights like this, but in some ways I suppose that can be quite good, because it makes you appreciate the good nights and the warm temperatures even more. And I'm a bit disappointed with myself for not getting out and trapping on those nights when we have had very warm temperatures these last few nights. Who knows what I could have caught. But time to pack up as the moths still continue to come in.